Up until now, we have worked with console log to view our code. It's time we turned our attention to the document object model, or DOM as it's more commonly called, in order to interact with content on a web page. Technically, the DOM is an API for HTML, as well as XML and SVG, and it offers up a web page as a tree of objects. As the W3C specs put it, with the DOM, programmers can build documents, navigate their structure, and add, modify, or delete elements and content. Web browsers use DOM specifications to determine how to display web pages. For example, when we load a web page in the browser, what happens behind the scenes is that the browser is taking the HTML sent from the server and converting it into the DOM. Then, any JavaScript we write will interact with the DOM as an API for the HTML. In fact, the DOM is language agnostic, and we can use other programming languages to interact with it as well, not just JavaScript. What we end up seeing in the browser is based on the DOM and not just the original HTML source code. Later on in the course, we will look at using the WordPress API to access content from a site. In a similar way, we're going to look at the DOM API with JavaScript as a way to access and interact with elements from an HTML web page. In the document object model, everything is made up of nodes. These nodes are objects that are then made into trees. Like other objects, nodes can have properties and methods. There are a few different HTML-related node types, and each one has a corresponding number. We have the document node, number 9, which is the HTML document itself. Then we have the document type, number 10, which handles the doc type. Element nodes, which are quite common, are number 1 and represent all of the HTML elements on a page. Then we have text nodes, which are text values often found inside of element nodes or as attributes. I'll note that this concept of element versus text nodes can be confusing to folks who jump into coding JavaScript without really taking the time to understand the DOM API. So we'll revisit these two in depth in coming videos. Then we have comments, which are HTML comments represented by the number 8. And finally, for our discussion now, we have document fragments represented by the number 11, which can contain a collection of nodes, often used for inserting a group of elements or text nodes together into a document. To make this all a bit more concrete, let's take a basic HTML document and see how it maps to a node tree and different node types. We have here an HTML doc with a doc type, HTML tag, head tag, title tag, body tag, and then a header with some text, the paragraph tag with a link inside, and then text inside the link, and finally everything closing out. So very simple, something you should be pretty comfortable with if you've ever worked with basic HTML. Now let's see how this would be illustrated as a DOM tree. What we have as the very first element in our tree is of the document type. This does not actually correspond with any of our HTML elements or anything we see here, but the entire document itself. Then we have the doc type, and then our root element that's going to make up the rest of the page. This is our HTML tag that we would see here. Then we have our head element, which is number 1, which is an element tag. Inside of that, we have a title, and then inside of the title is the title text. So according to the DOM, the title tags here, opening and closing, are one node, and then the text that goes inside of it is a separate node. Then we come over to our body, and we can see inside of that we have a header, again with the header text, pointing out once more that these are two different types of nodes in JavaScript. The opening and closing element tags will make up the number 1 element node, whereas the text that goes in between it is going to be a child node of that, which is the header text. Finally, we have here our paragraph with some text that appears before the link. you could see this lorem is going to be represented by this here. And then we have our link with the link text as a separate node. And finally, the text that appears after the link, this ipsum here. The link also has attributes. In the past, element attributes were actually nodes in their own right. However, the specifications for this are changing with DOM 4, and attributes will no longer be nodes in the same way. This type of tree visualization of the DOM is quite common when you're first learning it. But there is nowhere in the browser or otherwise that we can really see a DOM represented in this tree-like fashion. It is possible, though, to explore the DOM in the browser, although it looks a little different. So, in the next video, what we'll do is look at the same code, but explore it inside the browser using the tool of the Web Inspector.